During the run-up to the 1992 election, I was a Ross Perot supporter, and I got tired of hearing everyone suggest that I would be throwing away my vote. I would get really upset with people telling me that unless I voted for a Democrat or Republican, that I was wasting my vote. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't understand how a two-party system made any sense at all. So I got curious about the history of the political parties, etc., and started to do some research. Like I said, this was around 1992. The internet really hadn't caught on or arrived at our community. We did have bulletin board networks like FidoNet, and through that I came in contact with a gentleman that had put important American documents and treatises about government onto floppy disks. And as I recall, he also included software to help you do research over these data files. You could do search and bookmark and cross-reference materials. Now that's all common today, but back then for a private citizen, that was kind of a revolution of its own to have all of these materials at your beck and call with all these capabilities for fast research. So the materials that I had were things like the Federalist Papers, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, of course, going back before that, the Articles of Confederation, all the preserved letters of Thomas Jefferson, Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, the works of John Locke, and my favorite, Frederick Bastiat. Well, Bastiat came later, but, I think in the 1830s when he wrote his treatises. It was wonderful because you could go back and look for certain terms like God, religion, church. At the snap of the finger, you could just cross-reference all these texts through that entire database of early writings. Which sort of brings me to my point. For as long as I've been politically active, folks have been arguing about this separation of church and state and the no establishment of religion clause contained within the First Amendment. And this was true of 1992 and that time period. The religion issue popped up in the editorial section of the local newspaper. By the way, our community is right-leaning, but the paper is left-leaning for some reason. Anyway, if I recall correctly, the editors were espousing the position that the Founding Fathers enacted the First Amendment to keep prayer out of the public places and especially the public schools. Some members of my local community wrote in and challenged that narrative. And this was on TV as well. You would see the pundits arguing about this almost on a weekly basis. And I started thinking to myself, this is madness. What is wrong with people? Of course the founders didn't want prayer or the Bible in public places or in the schools. That's why they wrote the First Amendment, duh. That's what they taught us in school, duh. Didn't you go to school? Duh. So I thought to myself, heck, this should be easy to prove. The anti-education knuckleheads should be able to prove them wrong easily. So I fired up my little Founding of America electronic library and did a text search on all those terms: God, religion, and church. I don't know, it took maybe a day of cross-referencing to realize the media, the Democratic Party, and my teachers all had lied to me. It was just plain as day that the vast majority of founders fully supported prayer in public places, including the schools. Even after the First Amendment was ratified, this was the case. It's not even a close question. If you go back to the writings of that time period, you're just not going to find hardly anybody that's opposed to these things. People in support of it, left and right, And the only one that springs to my head that was really against it was Thomas Paine. And even that he was against it supports the fact that, he was opposing the founders, the majority of founders that wanted it in. I forget the name of the pamphlet that he had published that was anti-religious, but even Ben Franklin, the supposed atheist of the founding fathers, he advised Paine against it. Now, I'm not a religious person. I've pretty much always been agnostic. Religion really hasn't, religion just hasn't worked for me. I've bordered with deist beliefs, but I've just never been confident enough to commit to whether there is for sure a God or for sure there isn't a God. I just don't know. What was important to me in 1992 was that people had lied to me, and the education system had lied to me, the newspaper had lied to me, the television news had lied to me, and so I walked away from the deceptions, the deceivers. Anyway, this current Walkaway movement reminds me of the Patriot movement around 1992. There were a lot of good people in that movement, but there were also some charlatans and some actual racists, to be honest. Definitely some sexists, I'll tell you that. Most of the people I knew I really liked and I held in high respect. But I had to walk away from that movement because they, and that includes myself, become self-delusional. My concern for the Walkaway movement is based upon what I saw back then. So in this Walkaway movement, a lot of you are saying, you've just been lied to basically all of your life by institutions that had a moral obligation, an ethical obligation to be honest and truthful to you. The news, the education system, political parties, your government. You don't think they have an obligation to be truthful to you? I do. It's a moral obligation. It's an ethical obligation. And the fact that they breach it every single time they open their mouths doesn't change that. They owe us. They owe their citizens the truth. And by golly, that should make you mad. Sure made me mad. No one is immune from adopting a bad idea. No one is immune from being manipulated. No one is immune to misinterpreting information or events. Heck, I probably do that 2 or 3 times a day. I try to double check to reduce those errors, but they still happen. So I think it's important to be aware of our own fallibilities, and probably even more important, to forgive others if they have the veil over their eyes. After all, most of the supporters of the Democratic Party are victims of manipulation, just like you were, just like I was. They just got hit worse, or they haven't had the luck or time or good fortune to figure out how they have been terribly deceived. I'm suggesting that we engage the Democrats and be charitable, to cast their arguments in the best possible light, directly and forthrightly as we want to be treated, be polite as we want to be treated. But if they're not polite and you can't get them to be polite, then by all means just walk away. You certainly don't want to give them a victory, but at the same time, you don't want to give them any ammunition that feeds their rage. And hopefully they'll calm down, and at some point, maybe not even with you, but with somebody else, realize that, hey, I've talked to several people that are not members of the Democratic Party, and most of them are nicer than people within the Democratic Party. So you may not be the person that convinces them that they need to look deeper into this, but you could have played a part in turning that person around. I would suggest ask questions, be firm, and be polite and consistent. I don't know about you, but I've raged in the past. I'm going to rage in the future. I make fun of people that don't see things the way I do. Who am I to permanently disavow someone else who has flown off the handle? I want to be able to forgive myself. I want to be forgiven for the vitriolic things that I've done that were based on misinformation or just being in a bad mood. I believe in redemption. I don't want to cut anybody off from redemption. To show my nerd side, I like to think of it this way. Imagine Darth Vader as the SJW's enforcer. Through and through, he's a villain. Through and through. Yet because someone showed him love and set aside hostility towards him, he walked away from darkness and saved his son. Anyway, I'm thankful to all of you out there that are willing to listen to different points of view now, and those that are willing to step forward, that have stepped forward now and in the future, and in the generations that follow. I'm thankful for it all. Thank you. You have my sincere respect.